Hey, what's up everybody? Waba here, and I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about kind of an update to a build that I've posted in the past, the CI Lightning Trapper as a Saboteur. And, just kind of want to obviously talk about it right now because, the passive tree is going to be largely the same with some changes, but I believe this is going to be a very strong league starter with some pretty good options for bossing in the end, especially with the addition of the Lightning Spire trap. And in the description below, I will include this path of building that I am showing you right now, so you could get a good idea of your options, I suppose. Especially if you're a brand new player. There's other people who do a lot of good videos, like Waggle, for example. He has some pretty comprehensive trap leveling guides and also just trap guides as well. So anyway, let's just go ahead and talk about what has changed for traps, especially this build specifically in 3.3. So Lightning Trap no longer has a cooldown, which means you could throw as many as you need to, and that was a pretty big limiting factor for clear speed, especially when it came to mapping, and it kind of sucked. It wasn't too bad, but I found myself playing a Lightning Trapper at the beginning of 3.2 in Bestiary League, but then I did eventually switch it over to a Glacial Cascade Miner, as that was stronger. But I think that this was going to be, obviously in a much better position now, and it should be quite enjoyable. So anyway, a couple things on the passive tree did change. Master Sapper used to be way down here in BFE. It is no longer down there. So this is actually pretty good, because even though in the original build, ideally you want a Lightning Trap pierces additional targets Helm enchant from Uber Lab, so you could drop these points. Now you're going to be pathing down there anyway. So if you do find yourself getting that enchant, or maybe we get the Lightning Spire enchant, just to give you a little bit more bossing potential. If you do find yourself in a position where you're dropping these 3 points, we could easily pick up this Jewel Socket right here. Jewel Sockets are clearly good. I don't know if I would suggest not taking this, just because Master Sapper is pretty good. And yeah, the change over here where they added Devastating Devices gives you 50% increased critical strike chance and trigger area. So that's honestly pretty good. That's just the trigger area is a pretty big quality of life, especially for a Saboteur, because you kind of operate based off of chain reaction. So as soon as one of your traps trigger, the traps nearby that trap will also trigger, and that's something that would be ideal for you. You do have some changes to Hasty Reconstruction. It no longer gives you as much cooldown recovery. I don't know if they increase the damage on Hasty Reconstruction to compensate, but you could either go Hasty Reconstruction or you could go Expeditious Munitions. I would probably lean towards Hasty Reconstruction, because Expeditious Munitions only gives you trap throwing speed and trigger area. So while those are good, I would prefer the damage, because you shouldn't have too much of an issue getting your traps to trigger. It's not really an issue that people have had in the past. Saboteur got moved. Saboteur used to be right here, and Expeditious Munitions, I believe, used to be over here. I think it was where Master Sapper was. But you just pick up Saboteur. It's 2 points. It's off the travel, off of Assassination. It's very efficient for what it is, and pretty straightforward from there. Other than that, the passive tree is all the same. You're coming through the Witch area, grabbing Blast Cascade over here, which obviously is going to give you power charges and crit multi. You grab Throat Seeker, grab all the ES, Annihilation Wheel, path up through here, and up to an Unnatural Calm, Arcane Potency down to Zealot's Oath, because Zealot's Oath obviously is going to give you the massive amounts of regen that you get as a Saboteur. And yeah, pretty straightforward in that. Pyromaniac, as for your Ascendancies, Pyromaniac is what you would grab first. You just go Pyromaniac first, followed by Perfect Crime and Chain Reaction, and then I mean, you can go Born in the Shadows before Chain Reaction, is preference, but I would go Chain Reaction followed by Born in the Shadows. Uber Lab is like getting easier and easier each patch, so I don't have any problem with finding my trials. If I do, I just pay attention in global 820, and I usually find it, or I'll start saying looking for this trial, and I get an invite. So, for all the people who complain about trials in trade league settings, I feel like those complaints are a little unfounded, because I mean, if you're SSF, it's one thing, but Uber Lab, pretty easy. So this is the passive tree. Like I said, this will be in the description below. And yeah, this is also only level 85. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, 87, because obviously you're going to be taking Alira for the crit multi, mana regen, and the all resist. So 87 is really not too bad in the grand scheme of things. And let's talk about the gear a little bit, because you do have some choices. So first off, you just want a wand with as much spell damage and I'm sorry, you want a wand or a dagger or a scepter with as much spell damage, crit multi as possible. And now, obviously, if you use a wand, you have to resort to no movement skill or lightning warp, which lightning warp requires a lot of investment into sockets, or you could just run around, but then you would want to make sure you get the right Quicksilver and have onslaught, etc., etc. But obviously, in this build, we can use a Shimmeron as well. Now, if you're using a Shimmeron, just keep in mind that if you do use Lightning Warp or Shimmeron and you ever go into a pack and crit, you will take a lot of lightning damage, and you probably would be okay with the Trapper, with the Saboteur Pyromaniac Ascendancy. However, it's just something to keep in mind. Shimmeron is obviously really good. Now, with the recent changes to the way Elder works on the Atlas, we might find ourselves in a situation where Shimmeron prices will dip down a little bit in trade leagues, just because more people will most likely be killing Elder. But also their demand is going up at the same time. But I think it's going to balance out pretty well, because not everyone is going to be playing lightning trap builds or minor builds, but I'm probably going to be probably putting my foot in my mouth with that. Wrathpith is just a pretty good budget option. I've had a kind of a recent trend towards suggesting block and spell block, especially spell block, especially if you watched my video yesterday where I was talking about the Cold Snap build. But Wrathpith, decent amount of ES, life, spell damage. Oh, life doesn't matter, I'm sorry, but decent amount of ES, spell damage, a little bit of resist. And then, of course, it grants you spell block. Pretty good. You could obviously switch this out with something that would give you more damage. Just keep in mind it's going to start to get pretty expensive, especially in trade leagues. If you're looking at a 300 ES shield with 50 spell damage and 90% crit, that's probably going to be multiple exalts. I went pretty generic on all the rare gear. I slammed the ES down to like what I would consider the minimums of what you should be looking for. 200 ES on a Huber Circlet, 450 ES on a Val Regalia, 150 on some gloves. Obviously, you can switch these out for fingerless silk gloves for a little bit more damage if you'd like. As with what I mentioned earlier, how I've been having a tendency of leaning towards spell block. Rainbow Strides are incredibly, I think they're underrated at the moment, especially after the change to energy shield values. You know, you're looking at 100 ES boots right here. They give you a little bit of mana, obviously good whenever you are using your mana, and then 20 all res and 25% movement speed. If you prefer, you can go with something like Sintrek. Now, Sintrek, a little bit more variation in the cost, because obviously people are going to pay more for the 150 plus energy shield Sintreks, but Conjurer Boots, Rainbow Strides, good as well. A rare amulet. Now, you're obviously a CI build, so I have Keula is something that's, you know, something that you may want to consider using because it gives you stun immunity. I, however, prefer Valerium, just for the simple reason that you could get a lot of damage in ES out of your amulet, and you could get more damage in ES out of your amulet than a ring. So it's just a cost. It's just a preference of mine. You could obviously go with an Eye of Keula and then just use, you know, another ring. But if you're going to do the Valerium route, either way, just make sure on your jewelry you get as much energy shield, as much intelligence, and then whatever else, whatever other stats you may need. So, you know, if you need a little bit of strength, I don't think you will. Dexterity, you may need some dexterity. Real quick on the dexterity, that's actually kind of another reason why I don't really mind coming all the way down here for Master Sapper, because you're just picking up all these dex nodes, and that does help you a little bit when it comes down to your gearing. Pick up a crystal belt as soon as possible, just to get as much ES as possible. You could use the Darkness Enthroned if you'd like, because Abyss Jewels are obviously really good, but especially early on, Darkness Enthroned would probably, or not a Darkness Enthroned, Crystal Belt. Honestly, they'll probably be both worth about the same. Crystal Belts have gone down in value considerably, especially ever since Abyss League, so you could get one pretty early on. On to the Flasks. You know, again, I'm kind of like fiending for block and spell block, so Rumi's Concoction. Even in this setup right here, we have 42% chance to block and 39% chance to block spells, with a little bit of room on the passive tree to get more spell block, and potentially you taking Alchemist and Mind Barrier. Obviously this is, you know, level 93, but if you take Alchemist and Mind Barrier, your block goes up considerably, and you know, presumably you would get faster from your Quicksilver Flasks as well. So, yeah, Rumi's Concoction, you know, as good of a roll as you can get. It's just easy go-to defenses, and the flat 3000 armor isn't really too bad either. Diamond Flasks, pretty straightforward. You're a crit build, so Diamond Flasks are really powerful. A Wise Oak, this is just a preference. It just gives you more damage. You don't need to use it. You're probably going to have plenty of damage, especially in the, I want to say, like tier 8 to 12 range. Your damage will feel perfectly fine. Beyond that, you might start, you know, really leaning towards getting as much damage as possible, you know, via Wise Oak. Quicksilver Flask, and then the last Flask slot, you can kind of do whatever you'd like with. Now, as for your jewels, you don't really have too many on the passive tree, and I only put in this example the Hypnotic Eye Jewels or Abyss Jewels, just because they're going to be pretty common, and they're pretty popular. And if anything, on this build in its current state, you just don't have a lot of flat ES. As you get better gear, rare jewels may win out, may eventually be a little bit better. Also, there's spots on the tree like here, and Energy Within would be really good, but Energy Within prices have been really all over the place recently. I don't know how they're going to be at the start of the league for Incursion. But just important note, if you are going to use some Hypnotic Jewels, Abyss Jewels, make sure they're item level 75, so you could get at least the tier 2 flat ES roll. And then, you know, that actually kind of ties into what I was saying earlier about your belt slot. Same thing, if you decide to use a Darkness Enthroned, make sure that you get at least item level 75 hypnotic eye jewels, so you could get as much ES out of it as possible. Your links, in this POB, I have everything set to like a default gem level and quality of 19 and 10. This is pretty reasonable, I feel. This is also on a 5 link. Discipline and Wrath. Obviously, we're not including a Curse here. We're not including Arcane Surge. We're not including a Golem. Everything's been pretty conservative. So these damage numbers, while they look a little low, understand that it's going to scale much, much better. So, you know, I would, just use a cast with damage taken setup, a Flame Golem or an Ice Golem. If you want more physical damage reduction, use a Chaos Golem. I wouldn't really bother with the Stone Golem because you're going to have around like 7k ES when you're geared, like I'd say moderately. And the power that a Stone Golem gives you, or the flat regen, doesn't scale very well whenever your ES numbers gets super high. So I would definitely say between a Flame Golem, Ice Golem, or a Chaos Golem. Probably a Flame Golem and Chaos Golem is two I would recommend the most. And yeah, Arcane Surge, get a Curse. You could use a Arcane Surge with a Curse setup, like say for example Conductivity, Arcane Surge, and Increased Duration. That would be pretty good, and that would maintain your curses pretty well, especially when you need them. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I think that this build will perform much better than it has in the past, and it was already pretty good, and with the changes to traps in 3.3, it's going to be pretty solid. So let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below. Like I said, I will include the path of building in the description. And yeah, if if you like the video, please like, and if you think other people should see it, share it, whatever you want to do. Anyway, it's been waba, and I will see you guys later.